Write the full story now, following all the constraints, US English, 60-80K characters, opening climax, plus short CTA, 12 to 15 real twists, all numbers spelled out, no meta-commentary, no headings, animal welfare respected, and the ending echoing the premise. The floodlights of Brenner Field bled across the wet parking lot when the German shepherd froze mid-stride, copper snout snapping toward the crowd. He cut a straight line through 100 strangers and pressed his forehead into the sleeve of a woman he had never seen before. "Ma'am, I'm sorry," the officer panted. "Bosco doesn't do this." But Bosco was doing it, and he would not let her walk another inch. Before we go on, drop a comment and tell us what corner of the world you're listening from tonight, and subscribe so you don't miss a story like this one. Meredith Thorne stood very still because her legs had forgotten how to move. She was 34 years old, tall enough for people to notice, thin enough for them to worry, and she had come to a minor league baseball game only because a co-worker named Yvette had spent 3 weeks convincing her that fresh air might do something for the hollow in her chest. She had eaten a limp hot dog she did not taste. She had cheered when it seemed polite. She had counted the innings by watching the scoreboard clock and had wondered twice whether it would be rude to leave early. Now a stranger's dog was pressed against the denim jacket she wore over her sweater, and the officer holding the leash looked like a man who was seeing something he could not explain. "Please don't be scared of him," Kowalski said, and his voice was gentler than his uniform. "He's had a long day. He's not going to bite." "I'm not scared of him," Meredith said, and it was the truth. She was scared of the way the dog was breathing, low and steady, as if he had finally found something he had been trying to find for a very long time. She was scared of the way her sister's name had risen inside her without warning, the way names do when the ground you are standing on is not the ground you thought it was. The officer knelt beside the dog. His name tag said Kowalski, and above it, in smaller letters, a rocker patch said K9 Adair County. He touched 2 fingers to the shepherd's collar without pulling and looked up at her. "Mom, this is going to sound strange," he said. "Have we met before?" "No." "Is there anything on your jacket that isn't yours?" She looked down at the sleeve where the dog's warm breath was fogging the denim, and she thought of the closet at her apartment, the wire hanger holding the jacket for 8 years, the small silver zipper her sister had chewed on as a child. She thought of the note in a shoebox on the shelf above it, the note that said in her sister's rushed pen, "I'm going to be a little late, don't wait up." She thought of the truck stop in Delton, where her sister had left that note, taped to a napkin dispenser, and had never walked back inside. "It was my sister's," Meredith said. "It was Ivy's." The officer's face did something she would remember for the rest of her life. It did not open into recognition all at once. It opened slowly, the way a door opens in a house where someone thought they were alone. "Ivy Thorne," he said. "Yes." Bosco pressed harder into her sleeve, and Meredith felt the last of the crowd noise fall away, the way sound falls away underwater. Somewhere across the lot, a car alarm chirped and stopped. A father with a foam finger walked past, laughing at his son. The world moved on. The world did not know it had just stopped. By the time Kowalski walked her back to a black SUV parked crooked against a light pole, Yvette had come looking for her, coat over one arm, purse swinging. "There you are, honey. I thought you'd—" Yvette stopped and looked at the dog, at the officer, at Meredith. Her mouth stayed open for a beat too long. "What's going on?" "I'll explain later," Meredith said. "Are you okay?" "I don't know." Yvette hovered another moment, chewing the inside of her cheek. "Do you want me to follow you?" "No, honey. Go home. I'll call." She would think about that pause later. She would think about it a lot. But that night she only thought about how her hand kept touching the sleeve where Bosco had pressed his head, as if the warmth from a dog's forehead could keep something from slipping away. The Adair County precinct sat on a strip of Route 9 that was mostly gas stations and vinyl-sided storefronts. It smelled inside of old coffee and floor wax and the paper of too many case files. Kowalski walked her past the front desk with a nod that said, "Don't stop us," and a woman in a cardigan named Deputy Hollis rose to bring her a paper cup of hot water and a tea bag that had probably been on the shelf since spring. "Your sister's file is one of the reasons I still have this job," Kowalski said when they were alone. He set a manila folder on the table between them and did not open it right away. "I want to be honest with you before we go any further. I know your name. I know your address. I know that you moved 3 times in 6 years and that you never left Adair County. I know because I used to look for excuses to drive by the last known place people had seen your sister and check if any car in the lot matched the color of the sedan the truck stop clerk described the night she disappeared." Meredith did not answer. She wrapped her hands around the paper cup until it stopped burning her palms. "8 years ago, I was a rookie," Kowalski went on. "I wasn't on your sister's case, but my training officer was. He put me on the ditch off Route 9 the morning they found her purse. He told me to keep the tape line straight and not walk on the shoulder. That was my first missing person. I was 24 years old. I have not been able to close a case since, without thinking of hers." He rubbed the back of his neck and looked at the folder. "When Bosco came into the unit, we ran him through what we call familiarization. It's basically a walk through the evidence room, nothing formal. Some dogs perk up at old scent, most don't. Bosco perked up at a Ziploc bag we had marked IT/Route 9/October. That's Ivy Thorne. That's your sister's purse. So he's been carrying her scent for 3 years, Meredith said quietly. He has been carrying a memory of it, Kowalski corrected. Dogs do that. Handlers argue about how long the memory lasts. Some say 6 months, some say 4 years, some say forever. I've watched him work a training refresh on that bag every 3 months for 3 years because I asked them to keep it in rotation. That is not procedure. It's a favor a lieutenant did for me because he lost his own sister in 1992 and never talks about it. Meredith set the paper cup down. You have been keeping her alive for me, she said. Someone I never met. I have been keeping a case alive, Kowalski said. That is different. I want you to understand that difference because I am about to tell you that something happened tonight that I cannot explain by procedure, and I need you not to look at me the way people look at a man who is about to give them a miracle. I am not. Then what are you? A man with a dog who thinks he has smelled your sister within the last 24 hours. Meredith looked at him for a long time. Outside in the hallway, a phone rang twice and went silent. That jacket has been in my closet for 8 years, she said. That's the last thing anyone smelled of her. That is what he's smelling, isn't it? Kowalski did not answer right away. He opened the folder. He turned it so she could read it. He tapped a paper-clipped stack of photographs that had been printed off a truck stop camera in Delton 22 months after her sister had vanished. Then explain to me, he said, why he sat down in the exact place you were standing tonight and not the exact place your jacket was hanging 6 weeks ago. She looked at the top photograph, a truck stop counter with faded linoleum, a man in a red baseball cap, a hand pressed flat on the countertop, palm down. On the wrist, a thin silver chain with a tiny pewter charm shaped like a maple leaf. Ivy had bought that charm on a trip to Vermont the summer before her senior year. Meredith had bought her the chain for Christmas. That's from 22 months after, Meredith said, and her voice came out too calm. Yes. So she was alive. She was alive for at least 22 months, if this photograph is what we think it is. Meredith could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, slow and heavy, like a distant drum in a distant house. Who took this photograph? A trucker's dashboard camera. He was pulled in for coffee. He didn't know he was recording anything important. He didn't turn the footage in until a bartender in Delton named Alan Petrie called us 3 days ago and said he thought he'd finally figured out what he'd been sitting on. Alan Petrie. He tends bar at a place called the Two Rivers, out on the county line. He knew your sister. He served her a Coke on the night she disappeared. He watched her walk out the door with a man he had never seen. He gave us a description at the time. He gave us the same description 8 years later, word for word, without the file in front of him. He also gave us something new. What? Kowalski slid another photograph across the table. It was grainy, blown up beyond what the resolution could bear, but the man in the red cap in the truck stop had turned, just slightly, and something on the front of his cap was visible. A small embroidered patch, the letter H in gold thread inside a wreath. Halloran Feed and Grain, Kowalski said, the oldest family business in this county. Cyril Halloran, the grandfather, ran it until he died in 2010. His son Marcus ran it after him. His grandson Bennett runs it now. That patch was only on employee caps during a 2-year window before they redesigned. Between 2015 and 2017, the window your sister was alive but missing. She closed her eyes. You are telling me, she said, that one of the wealthiest families in this county was employing a man who had my sister. I am telling you, Kowalski said, that one of them may have been the man in that cap. The rain had started when Meredith walked out to her car at nearly 1 in the morning. Kowalski walked her out. Bosco walked between them, alert, calm, occasionally looking up as if to make sure she was still there. When she opened her car door, the dog put a paw on the sill just for a moment and looked at her with an expression that no one who has never loved a dog is allowed to laugh at. Get some sleep, Kowalski said. I'll call you at 9. I won't sleep. I know. Try anyway. She drove home with the wipers going too fast for the drizzle and the heater going too hard for the mild air because she needed something to argue with. Every red light was a fresh chance to think of a reason none of this was real. Every green light was a small betrayal because it made her keep moving toward a morning in which she would have to hear more of what Kowalski had not yet told her. At home, she did not sleep. She took the jacket off with the care she had used years ago when Ivy was small and she was helping her out of a snowsuit. She held it flat on the kitchen table and stared at it under the yellow light and thought about the fact that a dog had walked through a crowd of strangers to find something that had been sitting in a closet for 8 years. At 3 in the morning, her phone lit up on the counter. A number she did not know. She let it ring. It stopped and started again. She let it ring again. The third time it went silent and a text came in. Don't go with him alone tomorrow. You don't know who he works for. She stared at the message so long the phone screen went dark. She woke it back up. The message was still there. She copied the number, blocked it, and then unblocked it because in 8 years she had learned that any thread was better than none, even the ones that tried to strangle her. Who is this? She typed. Someone your sister trusted, someone who is still afraid. She sat down on the kitchen floor with the tile cold against the backs of her thighs and read the words again and again. At 6 in the morning she rose, showered, and put on the same jeans she had worn to the stadium. She did not put on the jacket. She could not. She put it into a canvas grocery bag and folded it in twice, and then she carried it out to her car with the reverence of a woman carrying a sleeping child. At 8:55, Kowalski called. You okay? I got a text, she said. From who? They wouldn't say. What did it say? She read it to him. He did not answer for so long she thought the line had dropped. Meredith, he said finally, I need you to come in through the back today. Take Willow Street to 5th, park behind the courthouse. Deputy Hollis will meet you at the side door. Are you telling me I'm in danger? I'm telling you that whoever sent that text is telling the truth about one thing at least. They're afraid. The precinct was quiet at 9 in the morning. Deputy Hollis walked her past a coffee machine that was hissing at no one and into a small conference room where the manila folder now had two friends. Bosco was there, curled on a blanket in the corner with the loose composure of a dog who has decided the day belongs to him. When Meredith walked in, he lifted his head, thumped his tail twice, and put it down again. Kowalski was there. So was a woman in a navy blazer whose posture said cop even before her face did. She stood up when Meredith walked in. "Sergeant Renata Marin," she said, "I ran your sister's case for the first 3 years. I've been retired from fieldwork since 2020, but I'm consulting on this now because I asked to be." "Why did you ask to be?" "Because I owe your family a phone call I never made." Meredith sat down. She did not say thank you. She did not know if that word applied. Marin looked at Kowalski, and Kowalski nodded, and Marin opened the folder. "When your sister disappeared," Marin said, "we treated it as a runaway for the first 96 hours. That was policy. I'm not defending it, I'm telling you. On the 5th day, I put her on the missing persons wire. On the 8th day, I got a call from a landowner off Route 9 who said his dog had brought a purse home. That purse turned out to be Ivy's. The wallet was inside. The cash was gone. The credit cards were not. That is not the profile of a robbery." "I know all of this," Meredith said. "You told my mother all of this." "I'm telling you again, because I need you to hear the part I did not tell your mother." Meredith waited. 2 weeks after we found the purse, Marin said, I got an anonymous letter at this precinct. Typed, no return address, postmarked Delton. It said, and I remember it word for word, "If you look at the Halloran family's private records for October, you will find the answer." I turned that letter over to my supervisor. My supervisor was a man named Wendell Braddock. He is retired now, but at the time he was the ranking sergeant in this building. He told me the letter was crank mail, and he was going to file it. I asked him if he intended to pursue it. He told me that the Halloran family had spent the last 40 years being generous to the department, and that we would not be knocking on their door on the strength of an anonymous note. I did not push. That is on me. I want you to know it is on me. Meredith could feel a slow heat crawling up the back of her neck. She kept her face still. "There were 3 more letters," Marin said. "One in the following March, one the year after that, one 3 years ago. The wording changed. The postmark stayed the same. Every one of them mentioned the Halloran family. Every one of them was filed and forgotten. I found out about the last 2 only after I retired, because Deputy Hollis kept them in a personal drawer and gave them to me when I started consulting." Meredith looked at Deputy Hollis, who was standing very still in the doorway with a cup of coffee in her hand. Hollis looked at the floor. "So this town has been holding a secret," Meredith said, "and the department has been holding it with them." "Not the whole department," Kowalski said, "but enough of it to matter." Meredith closed her eyes. "And now?" "Now the letters stopped after the last one," Marin said. "For 3 years, nothing, until yesterday, until Bosco walked across a parking lot. So someone was watching for me. Someone knew I was going to be there." "That is one explanation. It is not the only one. What's the other one?" "That the scent Bosco caught belongs to the person who wrote the letters, and that the person who wrote the letters was at that stadium last night, sitting 3 sections away from you, and did not know it." Meredith opened her eyes and stared at the wall. "Alan Petrie." "Alan Petrie," Kowalski confirmed. "Bought a ticket last night. Row K, Section 14. He was there when Bosco walked. He left 5 minutes into it. He has not returned our calls this morning." They drove to Delton at 10:30. Meredith rode in the back seat of the SUV, with Bosco stretched across her lap, warm and heavy, in a way that she had not experienced since Ivy had come home with a spaniel puppy in 1997 and had made the whole family sleep on the couch with it. Marin drove. Kowalski rode shotgun with his phone against his knee. The rain had stopped, and the sky was the grey of an unwashed window. Delton was 32 miles east of the county seat, on a bend of the North Fork River that used to matter for grain barges and now mattered mostly for pickup trucks, stopping at the truck stop where Ivy had left her last note. The truck stop had closed in 2017 and reopened as a diner called the Blue Kettle. The Two Rivers Bar sat across a gravel lot from it. Its neon sign was off. Its door was unlocked. Alan Petrie was inside, sitting on a stool with his hands folded in front of him and a half-drunk cup of coffee going cold at his elbow. He was 52 years old, thin as a length of pipe, with the pale, watery eyes of a man who had spent a long time working a night shift. "I figured you'd come," he said when they walked in. He did not stand up. Bosco walked to him without prompting and sat down at his feet, tail sweeping the floor once. And Alan looked down at the dog, and something in his face softened. "You wrote the letters," Marin said. "I wrote the letters." "Why now?" "Because I saw the dog on the news 2 weeks ago. There was a little story about the K9 unit. He was in the picture. I recognized him." Kowalski's eyebrows moved. "Recognized him from where?" "From the county fair in 2017. The Halloran booth had a puppy giveaway. Bennett Halloran was there with his father. There was a shepherd puppy on the table that Bennett said was the runt of a litter from a friend of his. I remember because he tried to hand the puppy to me, and I told him I couldn't take a dog. I remember because the puppy looked exactly like the one you have now, only smaller. And because Bennett said, and this is exactly what he said, we've got another one of him. He's a bigger boy. He belongs to a friend of the family. He's already been trained to keep his mouth shut." There was a long, careful silence. "Where did the puppy come from?" Kowalski asked quietly. "I don't know. But I know Bennett Halloran said it in front of me, and I know he said it the way a man says something he thinks is a joke when it is not." Meredith felt something cold slide down her spine. "Alan," she said, "why did you leave the stadium last night?" "Because I saw a man 3 rows in front of me who I had not seen in 8 years." "Who?" "Marcus Halloran, Bennett's father. He is supposed to be in a nursing home in Peoria with dementia. He was at that stadium last night. He was sitting with a woman I did not recognize. When Bosco started walking, he stood up and walked out. I followed him to the parking lot. I lost him at his car. I panicked. I came home." Kowalski looked at Marin. Marin looked at Kowalski. "Get up," Marin said to Alan. "You're coming with us, not because you're under arrest, because I do not want you in this bar alone." They drove Alan to a safe house that was really just Marin's spare bedroom on a quiet street north of the courthouse. On the way, Alan told them what he had never told anyone. 8 years ago, on the night Ivy Thorne had walked out of the truck stop, Alan had been pouring a Coke behind the counter of the Two Rivers when a man had come in and asked for a to-go cup of coffee. The man had been wearing a red baseball cap with a small embroidered H inside a wreath. The man had left a $5 bill on the counter and had walked out, and had gotten into a dark green sedan parked at the far end of the truck stop lot, and Ivy Thorne had gotten into the passenger seat of that sedan with him. Alan had told all of this to Sergeant Marin at the time. What he had not told her was that 6 weeks later, that same man had come back to the Two Rivers alone, had ordered a beer, and had asked Alan if he had spoken to any police. When Alan had said yes and had described what he had told them, the man had smiled and said, "That's fine. That's what you saw. That's what you tell them. Don't remember anything else." Alan had never remembered anything else on record until now. He had also never seen the man again until last night in the stadium, wearing a different cap, but with the same walk and the same slow, careful smile. "Marcus Halloran," Alan said. "Marcus Halloran," Marin repeated. "He is not," Alan said, "in a nursing home in Peoria." They put him on the couch with a blanket and a mug of soup and left Deputy Hollis to sit with him. Then Kowalski turned the SUV back onto the county road and drove them east toward a stretch of Halloran farmland where, according to the deed records Marin had pulled at 7 that morning, a farmhouse had once stood. The farmhouse had burned in the spring of 2017. The insurance report had been filed by Marcus Halloran. The fire marshal at the time had ruled it an electrical fire. There had been no one inside, allegedly. The Halloran family had never rebuilt on the site. The land had been left to grow over. There was a soybean field on the west side and a windbreak of ash trees on the east side, and between them a foundation of scorched cinder block that had settled into itself over 8 years, the way a mouth settles when someone is trying not to speak. Bosco worked the tree line for 20 minutes. He worked it methodically, nose down, tail rigid, the way he had worked the parking lot at Brenner Field, only slower now, deliberate, checking every foot of ground as if he were reading it. He passed the foundation twice and did not stop. He walked toward the windbreak. He stopped once at the base of a fence post and lifted his head, thinking. He walked on. He sat down at the base of the third ash tree from the north end. He sat down quietly, the way he had been trained to sit when he was sure, and he did not move. Kowalski walked to him without hurry. He knelt beside the dog. He looked up at the tree, at the ground around it, at the small half-collapsed hollow in the earth where a branch had once fallen and rotted. He looked back at Marin. He looked back at Meredith, standing at the edge of the field, hands pushed deep into the pockets of her jeans because she did not trust them to be still. "Ma'am," Kowalski said, and his voice was as careful as she had ever heard a voice be, "I need you to walk back to the car." She did not walk back to the car. She walked forward. She walked forward because she had spent 8 years walking toward this moment, and she was not going to spend it looking away. "Meredith," Marin said. "I know," Meredith said. "I know what you're going to say. I know what he's going to say. I know what all of this means. Please don't ask me to walk backward. Please don't ask me to be anywhere but next to him right now." She knelt beside the dog. She put her hand on the ground, palm down, gently, the way one puts a palm on the chest of a sleeping child. She did not cry. She would cry later, in a car, in the dark, when Kowalski was driving and Bosco was heavy in her lap. She would cry the way people cry when a door they thought was locked forever finally opens. But not now. Now she only closed her eyes and said, out loud, in a voice she had not used in 8 years, "I found you." The forensics team came out from the county seat at 4 in the afternoon. They set up tarps and lights and a small, quiet perimeter that they explained to no one and let no one closer than 20 feet. They worked through the evening. They worked without the news trucks that Meredith knew, in some newer corner of her mind, were already on their way. They worked until the light was gone. At 8 in the evening, Kowalski walked away from the tarp and came to her where she sat in the passenger seat of the SUV with the door open and Bosco curled at her feet. He crouched down beside her so their faces were level. Bosco lifted his head. "They found her," Kowalski said. "It's her. I am telling you before anyone else is going to, because you deserve to hear it from a person, not from a phone. It is her." She did not answer. She reached down and put her hand on Bosco's head and left it there. "We are going to ask you to identify some things tomorrow," Kowalski said. "Just to be certain. I am going to be with you when we do that. Is that all right?" "Yes." "I am so sorry, Meredith. You have nothing to be sorry for. I have 8 years of being sorry for. You brought her home. Bosco brought her home. Then you brought Bosco. That's the same thing." He nodded. He stood up. He walked back to the tarp. Bosco stayed where he was. She thought at that moment that the story was over. She thought that she would drive home in the morning with a name and a place and a grave to visit and a way to sleep. She was wrong. The story was not over. The story had barely reached the middle. and she would learn, in the days that came, that the ground under Adair County had been holding more than her sister. She learned it the next morning, in a small room with a fluorescent light that hummed like an old refrigerator, when a forensic anthropologist named Dr. Renee Coyle set a paper cup of water in front of her and told her that in the process of recovering her sister's remains, they had discovered evidence of a second individual buried beneath. "Beneath," Meredith said. "Deeper," Dr. Coyle said. "Older. We do not have an identification. We do not yet have a time frame. I want to prepare you for the possibility that this is going to become a much larger investigation than the one you came into this room expecting to hear about." Meredith looked at Kowalski. Kowalski looked at the floor. "How much older?" she said. "Preliminarily at least 15 years, possibly 20. So before Ivy?" "Yes." "So whoever did this to her had done it before?" Dr. Coyle nodded once. She had a very still face. It was, Meredith realized, the face of a woman who had learned over a career that stillness is sometimes the only kindness you have to give. "There is one more thing," Dr. Coyle said. "The remains of the second individual are wearing a wristwatch. It has a name engraved on the back, Delia Halloran." The name landed in Meredith's stomach like a stone in a well. "Delia Halloran," Marin repeated slowly. She had come in a moment before with a folder under her arm. She set the folder on the table. Cyril Halloran's youngest daughter, Marcus Halloran's little sister. She left home at 17 in 1999. The family said she'd run away to California. She sent postcards for about a year. Then the postcards stopped. The family said she'd gotten involved with a bad crowd. Nobody ever filed a missing persons report, because as far as any of us knew, she wasn't missing. She was just gone. "She wasn't gone," Meredith said. "She was under a tree." "She was under a tree," Marin agreed. Kowalski's phone buzzed in his pocket. He looked at it. He looked at Marin. "Bennett Halloran," he said. "He's downstairs. He wants to talk. He came in on his own." "Then let's talk to him," Marin said. Bennett Halloran was 39 years old. He looked 10 years older. He was wearing a barn jacket over a flannel and jeans, and he had brought with him a leather folio the size of a Bible. He set the folio on the table in front of him and did not open it right away. "I'm here without a lawyer," he said. "That is on purpose. I am recording this conversation on my phone in my pocket. That is also on purpose. I'm about to make a series of statements that I want on the record with 3 different people in the room. Is anyone going to stop me?" "No one is going to stop you," Marin said. Bennett nodded. He opened the folio. Inside was a stack of documents that were not organized so much as they were preserved, the way a nervous person preserves things. Photocopies, bank statements, a handwritten letter, a photograph of a young woman in a graduation gown with a maple leaf charm around her neck. "My Aunt Delia disappeared when I was 7 years old," Bennett said. "My father told me she had run away to California. My grandfather told me the same. My mother, before she died, told me one time when I was 15 and she was drunk, that my Aunt Delia had not run away and that I should not ask my father any more questions about her. I did not ask my father any more questions about her. I asked my father one question about her, one time, when I was 22 years old, and he told me if I ever brought her up again, he would make sure I did not inherit a nail in a fence post. I did not bring her up again." Meredith watched his mouth move. She watched his hands stay very flat on the table. 8 years ago, Bennett went on, a young woman named Ivy Thorne went missing from a truck stop in Delton. I read about it in the county paper. I did not know her. My father did. My father knew her because she had come out to our feed store the week before she disappeared, asking about a job in the office. My father had told her we were not hiring. I found this out 3 days later when the sheriff came to our store, and my father lied to the sheriff and told him he had never seen Ivy Thorne in his life. I stood behind a shelf of cattle mineral tubs and I heard him lie. I did not correct him. I was 31 years old and I did not correct my father when he lied to a sheriff about a missing woman. That is on me. That is on me for the rest of my life. Meredith did not move. For 6 weeks after that, Bennett said, my father took a green sedan out of our farm shed every second or third night and did not come home until dawn. That sedan had been sitting under a tarp since I was in high school. I did not know it ran. I did not ask where he went. I did not ask what he did. When the sheriff came back to the store a second time to ask if we owned any green sedans, my father told him no, and I did not correct him. I have not slept a full night since. Kowalski's jaw was set so tight, Meredith could see the muscle under his skin. 2 weeks ago, Bennett said, my father, who is supposed to be in a memory care facility in Peoria, walked out of that facility, called himself a taxi, took a bus, and turned up at our farm. He told me he had come to fix something he had left unfixed. He told me he needed the keys to the storage building on the old Halloran property, the one on the north side of Delton, where the farmhouse used to be. I did not give him the keys. I did not call the police. I called the memory care facility, and I asked them to come get him. They came. They took him back. He has been under closer supervision since, but 3 days ago he walked out again. I have not been able to find him. I called Peoria this morning. Peoria has not been able to find him. Alan Petrie called me last night and told me he had seen my father at Brenner Field. I believed him. That is why I am here. He closed the folio. I want to help you find my father before he finds you, he said, looking at Meredith for the first time. I want to help you because I owe your sister that. I owe your sister every hour I have left. Meredith held his eyes for a long time. Then help us, she said. The next 48 hours moved the way water moves when a river tips over a dam. The county sheriff, a heavy-set man named Bo Reston, ordered an all-points bulletin on Marcus Halloran. The state police joined. The FBI sent a 2-agent liaison from Springfield who wore a raincoat that had never been rained on. Deputy Hollis brought Meredith 3 sandwiches she did not eat and 1 cup of coffee she did. Yvette from work called 4 times and Meredith did not answer, and then called a 5th time and Meredith did not answer, and then sent a text that said, "Please tell me you're okay," and Meredith wrote back, "I am okay," and did not say more. She thought of Yvette often in those 2 days. Yvette who had spent 3 weeks convincing her to come to a baseball game. Yvette who had shown up in the lot when the dog was still pressed to her sleeve. Yvette whose eyes had done something small and strange when she had seen the officer and the shepherd. She kept the thought of Yvette in a corner of her mind where she could get to it later. She had learned in 8 years that suspicion is a bad drunk. Better to keep it locked in the cabinet until you can sit down and open it slowly. On the second morning, she sat in the small conference room again with Marine and Kowalski and a whiteboard that had 8 names written on it. Marcus Halloran at the top. Below him, in a rough tree, the people who had been in his life for the past 25 years. Cyril Halloran, deceased. Bennett Halloran, cooperating. Delia Halloran, deceased. A man named Ford Whitlock, an old friend of Marcus who had died in 2020. A woman named June Halloran, Marcus's wife, deceased in 2014, a cousin in Ohio. A driver named Curtis Yost, who had worked for the Halloran feed store from 1998 until 2009. And at the bottom, a name that Kowalski had underlined twice. Petrie. Alan? Meredith said. Not Alan, Marin said. His brother. Meredith looked at her. Alan Petrie has a brother named Roy Petrie, Marin said. Roy was born 8 years before Alan. Roy left Adair County in the late 1980s, moved to Kansas City, came back in the mid-2000s, and worked as a mechanic for the Halloran feed store. He fixed their trucks, he fixed their tractors. He fixed, according to a receipt I pulled out of a box in the store's archive this morning, one 1991 Buick Regal sedan in September of 2015. Color green, reason for repair, replaced fuel pump, signature at the bottom, Roy Petrie. So Alan's brother was the one who kept the sedan running. That is what the receipt tells me. Does Alan know? That is a question we have not yet asked him. I would like you not to ask him yet, not until we know what Roy knows about tonight. Meredith rubbed the bridge of her nose. Where is Roy now? Roy has been living in a trailer on a hunting lease east of Delton since 2020. Off-grid, solar and propane, no landline. Cell service is bad. He's hiding. He is a man who prefers his own company. That is one theory. He is a man who is afraid of something. That is another theory. He is a man who is loyal to Marcus Halloran and would drive out to a trailer to hide him. That is the theory I like least, and the one I need to eliminate first. Kowalski's phone rang. He answered it. He listened. He set the phone down slowly. State Police just got a tip, he said. Someone matching Marcus Halloran's description bought gas at a station east of Delton 20 minutes ago. He was driving a 1991 Buick Regal green. He was alone. He paid cash. He is going to Roy's trailer, Maureen said. He is going to Roy's trailer, Kowalski agreed. They drove east on Route 9 with the last of the afternoon light behind them. Maureen drove. Kowalski rode shotgun. 2 state cruisers followed at a discreet distance. Bosco lay across the back seat with his head on Meredith's thigh, and Meredith kept her hand on the back of his neck because it was the only thing in the last 3 days that felt entirely, completely, unambiguously real. The road narrowed. The corn stubble ended. The gravel began. The trees closed in. Roy Petrie's trailer sat in a clearing at the end of a rutted lane. A wisp of smoke rose from a stovepipe on its roof. A dusty pickup truck was parked beside it, and behind the pickup, a green Buick Regal sat quietly with the driver's door open, as if whoever had been inside had climbed out in a hurry. The state police fanned out. Marin got out of the SUV. Kowalski got out of the SUV. They told Meredith not to get out of the SUV, and she did not. Bosco, on the other hand, hopped down the moment the door opened, and Kowalski did not stop him. The dog trotted across the clearing with his nose in the air. He circled the Regal once. He walked to the trailer door, which was standing ajar. He pushed it wider with his shoulder. He walked inside. There was a long, quiet moment. Kowalski walked to the door. He looked in. He said, very softly, "Sarge." Marin walked to the door. She looked in. She turned and walked back to the SUV with her hand on her radio. "Mer," she said through the open window, "we are going to need you to stay in the vehicle for a while. Roy Petrie is deceased, not recently. 2 or 3 days at least by the smell. Marcus Halloran is not here. We are going to secure the scene. Do not get out. Do you understand me?" "I understand." "Bosco, come." The dog trotted back out through the door, gave one small shake of his fur, and jumped up into the back seat as if he had been out for a very ordinary walk. He lay down with his head on Meredith's thigh, and he waited. They found the note under a jar of preserves on Roy Petrie's kitchen table. It was written in a steady, older hand, with a fountain pen, on a page torn from a notebook. It said, "I have paid you the last thing you are owed. You will not receive any more. This is finished on my terms. It was signed with the initials MH. He killed him," Meredith said, when they were driving back to town in the dark. "Marcus, he killed Roy because Roy was going to talk. He killed him because Roy was the only person left who could put him behind the wheel of that sedan," Kowalski said. "And because Marcus Halloran, whatever else he is a man who cleans up after himself. And now he goes to ground until he thinks we've stopped looking." "He is not going to stop looking for me," Meredith said. Kowalski did not answer for a while. "No," he said finally, "he is not." That night Meredith did not sleep at her apartment. Marin drove her to a small cabin an hour west, off a county road that did not appear on most maps, that was owned by a friend of hers named Miriam, who had been a state trooper in the 90s. The cabin had a wood stove and a bed and a very old shotgun in a corner, and Miriam brought Meredith a plate of eggs at 8 in the morning without asking her whether she was hungry. Bosco stayed with her. Kowalski had insisted. Marin had not argued. On the third day, Yvette called again. Meredith answered. "Where are you?" Yvette said. "Somewhere safe." "I have been so worried." "I know." "Meredith, I have to tell you something. I have been trying to tell you for 2 days. Please don't hang up." Meredith sat down on the edge of the bed. Bosco lifted his head. "Go on," she said. Yvette told her. Yvette told her that her name was not Yvette Danner, not really, that her real name was Yvette Halloran, that she was Delia Halloran's daughter, that she had been born in a hospital in Kansas City in 1997 and had been given up for adoption at 3 weeks old, that her adoptive parents had never lied to her about being adopted, but had not known who her mother was, that Yvette had gone looking at 22 after both of them had died in a car accident, that she had found her mother's name in a sealed record, that she had found her mother's family, that she had spent the last decade quietly building a life within reach of them, watching, waiting, gathering, because from the moment she had first knocked on the door of the Halloran farmhouse and been turned away by her own Uncle Marcus, she had known, in a way she could not explain, that something in that family had swallowed her mother whole. She had taken a job at the same insurance office where Meredith worked because she had read about Ivy Thorne's disappearance in an old copy of the Adair County Herald and had recognized the sedan the truck stop clerk had described. Because it had matched a photograph her mother had once sent her adoptive mother before the mother she had never met had stopped sending anything at all. Yvette had wanted, she said, to meet Meredith slowly, carefully, to become first a co-worker and then a friend, and then someday a person Meredith would trust with the truth. She had wanted to bring Meredith to Brenner Field because there was going to be a Halloran family reunion picnic held there before the game, and she had wanted Meredith to see, from a safe distance, the faces of the people who had been in her sister's life on the night she vanished. "I didn't know Marcus would be there," Yvette said, crying now, over the phone. "I thought he was in Peoria. I thought I was going to point out Bennett and Ford Whitlock's widow and the driver Curtis Yost and let you see them and let you decide what to do with what you saw. I didn't know Bosco would find you before I did. I didn't know he would find you at all." Meredith listened. "I sent you the text," Yvette said, "the one that told you not to trust him alone." "Who did you mean by him?" "I meant Marcus. I meant if Marcus contacted you. I did not phrase it well. I have not slept in 3 days. I am sorry." "Yvette." "Yes." "I forgive you for lying about your name." "Thank you." "I do not forgive you for using me. I need to be honest about that. I do not forgive you for choosing me as a way in. I need time before I know how to feel about that." "I understand. But I am glad you told me. I am glad you did not let me hear it from a stranger in a courtroom in 6 months. Meredith, I am so sorry about Ivy." "So am I." She hung up. She sat with the phone in her lap for a long time. Bosco laid his head on her knee. She thought then of the family reunion picnic, of the fact that Marcus Halloran had been there, of the fact that the Halloran family had gathered at the same public park where Meredith had gone, at the invitation of a co-worker she had barely known, on the same night that a canine dog with 8 years of training on her sister's scent had walked among them. She thought and thought and thought. Some things do not happen by coincidence. The next morning, Kowalski called and told her they had a lead. "Where?" "An old grain silo on the western edge of the Halloran property. Bennett drove out there yesterday on his own. He did not go in. He called us. He said the padlock on the silo has been cut and replaced. Someone is using it. Marcus, that's my guess. When are you going? Tonight. We're waiting for dark. I'm coming. Meredith, I'm coming, Dale. Do not fight me on this. He is my sister's murderer. I'm going to look him in the eye. I'm not going to shoot him. I'm not going to yell at him. I'm going to stand there while you put him in handcuffs. That is my right. Give me that. There was a long pause. Miriam will drive you. I want Bosco with you. I want you behind the third truck in the line, and you do not step out until Marin tells you to step out. Are we clear? We're clear. The silo stood on a low rise at the edge of a soybean field, its concrete flanks streaked black with 60 years of weather, its cap askew. A path of trampled grass ran up to its door. The door had been recently oiled. The padlock, a new brass one, hung open on the hasp. The state police went in first. Kowalski went in second. Marines stood outside with Meredith and Bosco and a young trooper whose name Meredith did not catch. They came out 3 minutes later with Marcus Halloran between them. He was 74 years old. He was thin. He was wearing a barn coat over a corduroy shirt and a red baseball cap that he had removed and was holding in his cuffed hands as if for some reason he still cared about being polite. His face was thin and sharp, the face of a man who has spent his whole life being told he was smart and had decided to believe it. He looked at Meredith across the trampled grass, and something in his expression flickered, and then held. "You are the little Thorn girl," he said. It was not a question. Meredith did not answer. "Your sister was a nice young woman," Marcus said. "She should not have come out to my store asking questions about my sister Delia. She should have kept walking." But she did not keep walking. She kept asking, and people who kept asking about Delia have always had a way of finding trouble in this county. Your sister was the last one to find it. I regret that. I do not regret much, but I regret that. The trooper beside him tugged at his arm. Marcus did not move. "You are very welcome," Marcus said to Meredith, "to hate me now. Everyone else does." Meredith stared at him. She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not step forward. She did not step back. She said in a voice that was steady and quiet and belonged entirely to her, "You are wrong about one thing. I do not hate you. I do not have the energy. I have spent my energy loving her. There is none of it left for you. There will never be any of it for you. You will die in a cell, and I will not visit, and I will not attend, and I will not name you when I speak of her. That is the only thing I'm going to give you, and it is the worst thing I can give you, which is why I'm giving it. Take him." The trooper took him. They put him in the back of a state police cruiser. He looked out the window at her once. She looked back at him once. She turned around. She walked to the SUV. Bosco walked with her. She got into the back seat. She closed the door. She cried then, not for him, for Ivy, for 8 years, for the small silver zipper on a denim jacket, for a note taped to a napkin dispenser, for a girl who had gone to a feed store because she wanted a summer job in an office and had walked back out with her name written on a page in a killer's head. Bosco laid his head on her thigh and did not move for the entire drive home. Marcus Halloran was arraigned in Adair County Circuit Court on a Wednesday morning in early December. He was charged with 2 counts of murder in the first degree, one for Ivy Thorne and one for Delia Halloran. He was charged additionally with the murder of Roy Petrie. His lawyer requested a competency evaluation. The judge granted it. The lawyer's expression, when he thought no one was watching, suggested he did not believe it would help. Bennett Halloran turned over the family's private books voluntarily. In them, forensic accountants would find over the following months a pattern of cash withdrawals coinciding with several other unsolved missing person cases across 3 counties, spanning the years 2003 to 2015. The Halloran story, which Adair County had told itself for 4 generations, was a story about a family of hard-working farmers who had built something out of nothing. would be rewritten slowly and painfully into a different story. The feed store would close. Bennett would sell the farmland at a loss to a young couple who wanted to raise organic beef and would rebuild the pasture fences by hand. Yvette would come to Meredith's apartment on a Sunday afternoon in early January with a pan of banana bread and a face that had learned how to be afraid of asking. Meredith would let her in. They would sit at the kitchen table for a very long time. Meredith would not promise her they would ever be close again, but she would tell her that she was glad she was alive, that Delia's daughter had turned out to be a person who could love, that not everything a family passes down is a wound. Yvette would cry quietly, and Meredith would pour her another cup of coffee. Alan Petrie would sell the Two Rivers bar in the spring and move to Iowa, where he had a cousin who ran a small hardware store. He would send Meredith a postcard a year later from a lake she had never heard of that said only, "Thank you for not blaming me. I did not deserve it, and I will never forget it." Sergeant Renata Marine would come out of retirement long enough to file the final case report, and then, on the last Friday of her second retirement, would take a fishing trip to Wisconsin she had been promising herself since 2016. She would call Meredith once a month for the rest of her life. She would always answer the phone the same way. "This is your sergeant checking in." Officer Dale Kowalski would remain in the K-9 unit until Bosco retired at 10 years old. He would then request a transfer to the training division. He would give a speech at the retirement ceremony on a Saturday morning in a small auditorium behind the county fairgrounds, in which he would say only, "Some dogs bring you a case, and some dogs bring you a person, and some dogs, if you are very lucky, bring you a home." And then he would clear his throat and sit down, and Bosco, sitting at his feet in a red bandana, would look up at him with the patience of a creature who understood entirely. But that all came later. In late March, when the frost broke and the maples along Ashfield Road began to bud, they brought Ivy home. Ashfield Cemetery sat on a low slope at the edge of a small town 12 miles west of Delton. It had been founded in 1861 for the burials of Union soldiers, and it had grown, in the century and a half since, into the kind of cemetery where the paths were made of gravel and the older stones leaned like tired people, and the newer stones were flat in the grass so the mowers could go over them. The Thorne family plot was near a tall maple at the north end. Meredith's grandmother was there. Her father was there. Her mother, who had died 4 years into the search for Ivy without ever knowing what had happened, was there. There would be a place for Ivy now. The service was small. Meredith had asked for it to be small. There was a pastor from a nearby church whom the family had known for 2 generations. There was Marine. There was Deputy Hollis. There was Bennett Halloran, standing at the edge of the group with his hands clasped in front of him and his eyes on the ground, because he had asked Meredith if he could come, and she had said yes, and he had not spoken since. There was Alan Petrie, who had driven back from Iowa. There was Yvette in a black coat with a small bunch of white lilies she had bought from the grocery store because she had not known what people brought to funerals. There was Meredith, in the denim jacket, worn one last time, as she had promised herself, over a black dress her mother had once bought her for a wedding she had never gone to. There was Officer Kowalski at the back, in dress uniform, standing very still. At his knee, in a plain leather collar, was Bosco. The pastor spoke briefly. He said that Ivy had been a light, and that the world was less bright without her, and that a long night of not knowing was, in its own strange way, its own kind of loss, and that the ending of that night was, in its own strange way, its own kind of mercy. He said the 23rd Psalm. He said the Lord's Prayer. The wind picked up in the maple over their heads and dropped a small brown seed pod, spinning onto the grass beside Meredith's foot. They lowered the small urn into the small opening in the ground. Meredith stepped forward. She unzipped the denim jacket slowly, all the way down. She slid it off her shoulders and folded it, sleeve to sleeve, the way her mother had once taught her to fold a shirt. She held it against her chest for a long moment. She lowered it, gently, into a small cedar box that Kowalski had made for her over 3 winter evenings in his garage. She closed the box. She set the box on top of the earth. She said quietly, "I love you, Ivy. I always will. Rest now." She stepped back. The service ended. People spoke to her in soft voices. Yvette hugged her. Bennett shook her hand and did not try to say anything. Alan Petrie touched her elbow and said, "Mum," and nodded and walked away. Marine squeezed her shoulder. Deputy Hollis smiled at her, watery, and could not speak. Meredith walked across the grass, alone, toward the back, where a man in a dress uniform stood beside a black and copper dog. Kowalski straightened as she came up. He tried to say something. He could not. He looked in his dress blues, like a boy at a first dance, and Meredith found herself smiling for the first time in what felt like a decade. "Thank you," she said, "for every hour, for every drive-by, for every training refresh, for every letter you kept in the drawer, for every phone call you made, for the box, for the wood you sanded, for not stopping. Thank you." "You do not have to thank me. I know I do not have to. I want to." He nodded. His eyes were very bright. "He is a good dog," he said, because he did not know what else to say. "He is a very good dog." She knelt down. Bosco looked at her with the expression of a creature who had known her in some way that no one who has not spent a life with a working dog is permitted to argue with for a very long time. She put her hands on the sides of his warm face. She leaned in. She whispered into the fur behind his ear, so quietly only he could hear it. "Thank you for finding her. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for walking through all those people to a stranger's sleeve because you knew what nobody else knew." Bosco leaned his weight into her shoulder, slowly, the way dogs do when they have decided that the person they are leaning into is finally, at last, safe from the thing that has been chasing them for a very long time. They stayed like that for a long moment in the cool spring sun, under a maple tree, in an old cemetery in a small town, in the middle of a country that was much larger than either of them. And Meredith understood, without anyone having to say it, that some doors take 8 years to open, and some walks across a parking lot take 3 years of training, and some acts of love arrive on 4 legs with a copper snout and a slow, steady breath, and that not all miracles are the kind you see coming. Some are the kind you almost miss because you were only there to be polite. She kissed the top of Bosco's head. She stood up. She took Kowalski's arm, gently, because he looked like a man who needed to be steadied. They walked together, slowly, back across the grass, toward the small group waiting at the gate, toward the cars, toward a road that would take them home to a life that had been waiting, patient as a good dog, for her to come back to it. If this story moved you, if you would like more like it, take a moment now to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear that lost things can still be found, and subscribe to the channel so the next story finds you the way Bosco found Meredith, quietly, patiently, at exactly the right moment. Leave a comment and tell us what part stayed with you, because we read everyone.